Before the traffic, before the billionaires, before the name became a global shorthand for innovation, this place was known by a different name, a softer name. California's Santa Clara Valley was the Valley of Heart's Delight. Until the 1960s, it was the largest fruit-producing and packing region in the world. It was a paradise of prunes, apricots, and cherries blanketing the valley floor in blossoms. So how did a valley of fruit trees become a valley of silicon? The transformation didn't begin with an inventor, but with a professor. Stanford University's Dean of Engineering, Frederick Terman, had a radical idea. In the 1940s and 50s, the brightest engineering graduates went east for the best jobs. Terman was determined to keep them in California. He actively encouraged his students, like Bill Hewlett and David Packard, to form their own companies right in his backyard, personally investing in many of them. Then, in 1951, he spearheaded the creation of the world's first university-owned industrial park, leasing Stanford land to high-tech firms. He was building an ecosystem, a community of technical scholars, turning the university from an ivory tower into an engine of industry. The unique environment of the future Silicon Valley was being intentionally cultivated before its defining product even existed. Terman was building the greenhouse. Now, he needed the seed. It arrived in 1956 in the form of William Shockley, a Nobel Prize winner for co-inventing the transistor. Shockley was one of the most brilliant minds on the planet. He left the prestigious Bell Labs on the East Coast and came back to California, partly to be near his ailing mother in Palo Alto. He decided to start his own company with a singular goal: to commercialize a new kind of transistor, one made not from the standard germanium, but from a more powerful, more robust material, silicon. He founded the Shockley Semiconductor Laboratory in Mountain View, the very first company in the valley to work on silicon devices. Shockley had the Nobel Prize, the funding, and he recruited the brightest young scientists in the country. He had everything he needed to build an empire. One fatal flaw in his character would trigger a betrayal that, instead of building one company, would build an entire industry. William Shockley was a brilliant physicist, but a rough manager. His management style was described as authoritarian and paranoid. He recorded phone calls, refused to let his staff collaborate, and in one infamous incident demanded lie detector tests to find a supposed saboteur. His genius was eclipsed by his distrust. In 1957, 8 of his most brilliant young employees, including Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore, had enough. They went over his head to the company's funder, Arnold Beckman, and demanded Shockley be replaced as manager. When Beckman ultimately sided with Shockley, the 8 men walked out. Shockley called them the Traitorous Eight. The next day, with backing from New York industrialist Sherman Fairchild, they founded their own company, Fairchild Semiconductor. This was more than just a new company. It was a new way of doing business. Led by the charismatic Robert Noyce, Fairchild rejected the rigid East Coast corporate hierarchy. The atmosphere was casual, collaborative, and critically, it gave employees stock options, making them owners in the company's success. It was the birth of the Silicon Valley startup culture, and it worked. At Fairchild, engineer Gene Herney invented the planar process, a revolutionary technique that allowed transistors to be reliably printed onto a flat piece of silicon, protecting the delicate junctions with a layer of oxide. For the first time, mass production of reliable silicon devices was possible. And just as this new technology was born, it got the most important customer in history. To win the space race, NASA needed to shrink a room-sized computer into a tiny command module for the Apollo missions. It was a monumental challenge. They made a high-risk bet on Fairchild's unproven integrated circuits. The Apollo program became the single largest buyer of chips in the world. at one point consuming an estimated 60% of all integrated circuits produced in the United States. This massive, guaranteed demand from the government had a staggering effect on the price. The cost of a single chip plummeted. The government's bet didn't just fund the industry, it proved to the world that these tiny silicon chips were reliable enough to take humanity to the moon. This relationship was more than a transaction. It was a king-making moment, providing the capital and validation that accelerated the entire industry by a decade. The chip had been proven in space. The price was in free fall. And the Fairchildren, engineers leaving Fairchild to start new companies, were populating the valley with innovation. But all this power was still locked away in government projects and corporate mainframes. One final breakthrough was needed to put the power of a computer on a single chip. That breakthrough came in 1971. Two of the original Traitorous Eight, Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore, had left Fairchild to start their own company Intel, short for Integrated Electronics. There, a team of engineers led by Federico Fagan and Ted Hoff invented the Intel 4004. It was the world's first commercial microprocessor. They had integrated the entire central processing unit of a computer, the brains of the machine, onto a single sliver of silicon no bigger than a fingernail. The power that once filled a room was now held on a fingertip. And that one chip changed everything. It made the personal computer possible. Just a few years later, in the garage in Cupertino, two local kids, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, used a microprocessor to build the Apple II. It wasn't a kit for hobbyists. It was a friendly, fully assembled consumer product designed for ordinary people. With the invention of BusyCalc, the first electronic spreadsheet program, the Apple II became a killer application. It gave homes, schools, and small businesses a reason to own a computer. The revolution was no longer locked in a lab. It was in your house. As this explosion of innovation was happening, journalist Don Hoefler was covering it for the trade paper Electronic News. In a 1971 series of articles, he gave the region the name that would stick forever: Silicon Valley, USA. It was the perfect name for a place built on sand and dreams. From fruit orchards to a professor's vision, from a handful of traders to a trip to the moon, it was the silicon chip that transformed the Valley of Heart's Delight into the place that would invent the future.